Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 110 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I've got Mike Koomar with me, and tonight it's our Big 12 preview episode. We're going to start rolling these out this week and into next week, even after the first couple games. But we want to get to all the big conferences. And, Mike, we're going to start in your Big 12 on the screen now. We've got the preseason poll and the Torvik rankings sorted by Big 12. Mike, there are 16 teams in the Big 12 this year, I believe. No newcomers this time around. Last year was the first hoorah for some of these guys, but now that we're getting settled into this 16-team Big 12, what are your general expectations going into this one?
So for the Big 12, I'm looking for a little bit of a rebound. Last year was the worst year in terms of metrics that the Big 12 has had in probably 15 years. You look at a lot of it, that reason is some of the additions. The Big 12 has got some great additions with Houston and BYU within the conference, but a lot of detractions, a little bit of subtraction by addition, if you will, with adding programs like Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, programs that don't have traditional strength in basketball, and they certainly don't have it right now. None of those teams. Those are all my bottom three teams in the conference this year as well. But also looking for a rebound from some teams that didn't do as well as expected, that have done well a lot recently. Baylor obviously had a bad year last year. Kansas has not played up to standard the last couple of years, in part due to Bill Self's health. K-State, we're looking for a rebound. We haven't really seen much from Coach Tang's squad after that Elite Eight performance in his first year. As well as West Virginia, can they get back on the map? You know, where have they been the last couple of years now with their third coach in 3 years? So we'll see if they can be able to finally turn that program around and get some long-term success.
So we're not going to go through every team. That would take way too long. Joe and I do it for the Big Ten, and it takes more than 2 hours. So we're going to hit a few of the headlines here, and then maybe make some bold predictions at the end. But, Mike, as much as you said, teams are looking for bounce backs. Teams are looking for some consistency. The team with 14 of the 16 first-place votes and are currently sitting at number 1 in Bart Torvik, that is Kelvin Sampson and the Houston Cougars. Consistency is their middle name. See, it doesn't matter who's wearing that jersey. It seems like they come to play. They've seamlessly transitioned into the Big 12. They won 30-plus games, it seemed like, every year there in the American Conference. And then that sort of continued when they joined the Big 12. But, Mike, first in defense, from an adjusted defensive efficiency number 1 in Torvik, expectations are pretty high down there for Sampson and the Cougars.
Yeah, this is my preseason number 1 team in the country, and there's a reason for it. It's because they're defensive juggernauts. You look at who they're returning. Yes, they've got some losses in their backcourt, but returning Emmanuel Sharp, Milos Uzan, and Joseph Tugler, who's going to be the Defensive Player of the Year in college basketball, is my prediction this year. They're going to be incredible this year. They've also got a couple of new freshmen. I'm sure we'll talk about them in a little bit. But Houston, they've just been inflappable since entering the Big 12. I think a lot of people thought that they would have a little bit of a learning curve coming from the American. They've only lost 4 Big 12 conference games since joining, which is just incredible.
That's over 2 full seasons?
Over 2 seasons.
Yep.
And yes, you can argue that the Big 12 is significantly weaker than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, etc. But it doesn't diminish the fact that this is still arguably the best conference in college basketball this year. Certainly not last year, but we'll see what happens with Houston if competition can ramp up. I think there might be a couple of chances that they might have some losses. They might get picked off in the out of conference. They've got some tough games coming up. But I don't think that's going to have any impact on their ability to win the Big 12. They're the clear-cut favorites to win the conference right now.
And, Mike, as you were talking there, I do have their roster and their schedule up, but I just need to change something really quickly because it's getting cut off. All right, there we go. So they do have Auburn early on. They do have Syracuse, Tennessee all on neutral, Florida State on a neutral, Arkansas on a neutral. So they're certainly going to be tested. But as you look here, as I scroll through their schedule, they are the underdogs in just one game, and that is on the road in Provo. obviously projected record is a little bit different. Torvik has them going 24-6, 14-4. But with in this day and age, when you can bring back this, 3 solid contributors from the year before, that's going to give you an advantage over some of the other teams. And it seems like that they have scheduled well, as they have done the last couple of years. But as well, you're going to get plenty of opportunities in the Big 12 if that doesn't go well, which I don't think it will, or I don't think it'll go poorly. 3 Houston players, the 3 that we mentioned there, are on this preseason All Big 12 team. They did only have one team here with 10 players. Sharp, Tugler, Uzan all made it. Uzan was one of the 4 unanimous selections made by the coaches. So expectations are certainly high for Houston. All right, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I just one more thing on Houston. You look at the way that college basketball teams build a program for success in this day and age. Very different than it was 15 years ago with the one and dones. Now teams are built on defense. You want to have experience, but not only experience, but experience within your program. Guys that have been in that program 2, 3, 4 years. That's what's going to win you national championships. Houston's been right on the edge. They probably should have gotten one last year. Fell apart in the championship game late in that one, but they have a lot of returning talent that is coming back to their program, and they just keep it just seems to be like a factory. They're just producing it like homegrown talent, and that's going to continue to have their success. They're going to have some young guys this year, a couple of young guys that are going to be starting, freshmen in their backcourt, but I still expect nothing but the best from the Cougars.
All right, well, let's go down to the second place team. They received 1 first place vote. You'd think maybe that would be their own, but never know. That's BYU. 6th in Torvik, supposed to have the second best offense, 19th best defense. Mike, it's been sort of a meteoric rise here for BYU as they've gone into the West Coast Conference and now over to the Big 12. They had their coach taken, Mark Pope. He went to Kentucky. And they bring in Kevin Young. In year 1, they hit the ground running. A pretty exceptional year. Get into the NCAA tournament easily. Just a really fun product for the fans to watch. And they get the number 1 recruit, or number 2, depending on when the rankings came out. They get the number 1 or 2 recruit. They bring back Richie Saunders, and they surround him with a pretty a good supporting cast. But with Dabansa coming in, Saunders coming back, BYU is going to have Final Four hopes.
They absolutely do. This is probably the most expectations that have been in this program since Jimmer Fredette. And part of this is, look, Kevin Young has done an incredible job. Certainly, he's well exceeded expectations that most college basketball fans had for this program once he stepped foot on campus. But money talks.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, BYU has a lot of money. They know how to get it from their donors, and they know how to use it. And that's a big part, is knowing how to use it. A lot of programs have a lot of money. They don't know how to use it. We see a lot in football, a.k.a. LSU. Regardless, you look at a program that has been effective in poaching players, right? They poached Isaiah Wright from Baylor. Obviously, I'm a little salty about that. But Brigham Young is not my number 2 team in the Big 12. I know this is kind of a hot take. I have them at 4th. The reason I have them at 4th is their lack of defensive longevity on that team. Richie Saunders is a great scorer. Isaiah Wright, a great distributor of the basketball. Dabansa is going to be a star. We know they've got a lot of offensive power on that team. They don't have defense, though. This is going to be a team that's going to give up well over 80 points a game in conference play. And that's going to be a struggle late in this season whenever you have an off night or when you get into the tournament. We all know that defensive teams tend to win games in March. It's not the offensive juggernauts that win March Madness.
And we'll release our power rankings. Won't go through them here. There's just not enough room on the screen for us to be keeping track of all 3 of these things. The power rankings post will be going out around when this releases, roughly. But they've got a lot of talent, Mike. We talked about their exhibitions in a previous video. They certainly didn't look great in those. But they actually are one of the few teams that opens up this season with a pretty tough game They play Villanova in Las Vegas in the Hall of Fame series. They also play UConn. I believe that's in Salt Lake City. So
Yeah, it's basically a home game.
so
30 minutes from
essentially home game,
Provo.
and then I believe
Yeah.
the return game will be in New York next year. They play Wisconsin on a neutral, and then they play in the believe they play in Players Era as well. They have Miami, and then they have
Yeah.
Clemson. Like, this is a really really good schedule for BYU. They know that they have a lot of talent where they're going to be good enough to win a few of these games, and then they're going to go into the Big 12 season not really for a lack of a good resume. Um, they'll certainly have more chances to pick up big wins, but this is pretty similar to Houston, in which they're testing themselves pretty tremendously here in the non-con.
Yeah, very different than BYU most seasons. Even when they were in the West Coast
Yeah.
Conference, BYU didn't tend to challenge themselves in the out of conference. It hurt them in March when you're in the WCC. With that being said, they've loaded this schedule. I count five Power Five schools and they're out of conference, and that doesn't include the follow-on games they'll have in the ESPN Events Invitational
ESPN
after that
events.
Miami game. Yeah. So they've got plenty of opportunities to pick off quality wins before they get into conference, and I think it's going to be a good chance to see what this team's all about.
Yep, they will certainly have a chance to be really good. All right, down the list we go, Mike. And being that BYU is not your second place team, by looking at the screen, you could have a couple other guesses. So who will be your second place team here?
My second place team's going to be a hot take, but it's going to be the Arizona Wildcats. Currently ranked fourth in the Big 12 preseason poll.
They did get a
Sean,
first place vote.
they did get a first place vote, and I'll tell you why. They've got 9 returning players from a year ago. Yeah, they're losing Caleb Love, but they've got Jaden Bradley, a 6'3" senior guard that's going to have no problem running point for the Arizona Wildcats. Toby Awaka is also coming back. They've got a lot of good players. They've also got some great talent that's going to be probably likely one and dones. Braden Burries, the ninth overall prospect going into the year, and Koa Pete, who's the 11th overall prospect going into the year. So they've got talent. They've got talent that stayed within the program, and they've got some outstanding players that are coming in. So I think this is going to be a big year for Arizona.
And the key for the Wildcats, Mike, is going to be shooting the three. That sort of has been the issue over the years, and but they seem to have, they have a couple like real veterans with a bunch of freshmen. That was sort of like what Duke did last year with Cooper Flag, and obviously that worked pretty well because they were probably the best team in the country, and you know, ultimately sort of blew the game against Houston in the Final Four. But this is a good. This formula seems to work, and it's Tommy Lloyd, I believe, year 4, if I had to
Yep,
guess.
year 4.
So, expectations high for them. Also, they do also start in this Hall of Fame series where they'll play the defending champion Florida Gators. They also play UCLA. I believe that's in Los Angeles. I know it's a neutral, but then they go on the road to Connecticut, Auburn at home, Alabama on a neutral, San Diego State on a neutral. So getting to be a pretty familiar thing we're saying here, Mike, another loaded non-conference schedule for a Big 12 team.
Yeah, this might be the most loaded non-con that we're going to see in the conference.
Yeah.
I would argue it's got to be one of the toughest in the country, especially when they scheduled this. We still thought that Bruce Pearl was going to be coaching Auburn. I mean, you look at this; they're playing 3 Final Four teams in the two Final Four teams in the preseason. One more they'll play in the regular season. So, pretty tough stuff for the Wildcats. But it's going to really get them ready for a Big 12 conference play, where they actually have, I think, in general, an easier slate of
Yeah.
games. They do have to play Houston on the road, but they get BYU both times. They get them at home one of those games, and a lot of these tougher teams, they don't have to play twice. They got to play Arizona State twice. That's going to be a cakewalk. So I really like their ability to win games against lesser teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, the Texas Tech once.
Yeah.
Houston, they do have once. I know Texas Tech's at home, Houston's on the road. BYU is the only good team that they have twice here, and not exactly sure how How many? It looks like 18 games here in the Big 12, so that would be 15 opponents. That would be 3 teams twice, and the other 12 once, if I have
Yep.
my math
Yeah, and
correctly.
their teams that are twice are Arizona State, who's probably the worst team in the conference,
Yeah.
Brigham Young, and Kansas. And
Okay.
we'll get to Kansas.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily an easy one, but it could be harder.
Okay, so down the list we go, Mike. Arizona is actually third in Torvik at 12th overall, 14th in both offense and defense. 12 and 6 projected in the conference. They've got good numbers across the board. 41% returning minutes. And the only team in the Big 12 that has more is who I want to talk about next, and that's Iowa State, 15th in Torvik. TJ Otzelberger back for another season. Jefferson's back. Lipsy is back. Momchilovich is back. This team has been really solid over the years for TJ Otzelberger. Their defense has been the constant. Their offense has sort of fluctuated, but it's high expectations again for the Cyclones.
Absolutely. They're right now my preseason fifth in the Big 12. There's one team we haven't talked about yet, Texas Tech, we'll get to, that's in front of them. But with that being said, it feels like Iowa State once again is kind of flying under the radar. I think the conference has them preseason sixth, and pretty far behind. They're not getting the same press that a whole lot of other programs are getting. So you look at their returning talent as well as some of these guys that they're getting that are coming into the program. Blake Buchanan is going to be a really good center coming from UVA. They've also got Dominic Nelson coming in from Utah Valley, senior guard that was scoring 14 and a half points a game last year. So once again, they've got a lot of experience coming back. They've got some good transfers. This is a recipe for success, and this might be finally be the year that Iowa State can make a deep run in the tournament with TJ Otzelberger. They've exceeded expectations in every one of his years as a head coach at Iowa State. I don't see how this one's any different.
Yeah, I think health is important for them, obviously, as it is for everybody. Shooting does become a problem. You see the stats up here. The Iowa State players who've currently played college basketball are 34% from the field. Momchilovich is a 39.6% shooter on high volume. Him staying healthy is important. He was in and out last year. Heisey as well off the bench is 40% on lesser attempts, but being that there's only 2 or 3 guys here that have played college basketball, so not including the couple freshmen they've brought in, only 2 or 3 guys who are proven three-point shooters. I think that is going to be the narrative that will define Iowa State's season. But from a non-conference point of view, Mike, not as thrilling as some of the other ones, but still pretty good in its own right. They got Mississippi State on a neutral, and then they are going to Players Era, where they'll face St. John's Creighton and likely another solid team. They go on the road to Mackey to play Purdue. They host Iowa in the Cy-Hawk game, and then that'll be it for their non-conference. But still 5 games against power conference opponents, 2 of which are in the top 10 and another one in the top 25. Once again, a really good schedule.
Yeah, this isn't the best that we're going to see in terms of the out of conference, but with that being said, they're still playing some tough teams. We'll see how they stack against the Big East. They got St. John's and Creighton, so that's 2 of the top 3 teams in that conference. But you're still going to be able to catch a good glimpse of Iowa State. But I think we're really going to see what this Cyclones team is about once we get into the second part of this Big 12 conference. They get to limp in pretty easily. They've got Kansas early, they've got Baylor early, but they've got Oklahoma State a couple times in January, UCF, and Colorado. So a pretty easy January schedule. They'll really be able to ease into this Big 12 play. And then it gets difficult coming down the stretch. They've got Kansas again, Houston, at Brigham Young, Texas Tech, and Arizona State, all in their last 7 games. So the last 3 weeks of the season is where they're going to be able to make their money and get ready for March.
And this is just from a bracketology point of view, I'm looking at these non-conference games against non-power opponents, and just one of them is inside the top 250.
Yeah.
So they were sort of the poster childs for this new strategy of 4 or 5 good games and then try and get the bottom of the barrel to fill out your non-conference so you can beat them by a lot. and it looks like that they've done that again here. So look for them to be metric darlings early on, especially if they're able to beat one of these really good teams. But just a thought that came to mind here is they have 360, 314, 322, 295, and 325 on the schedule all at home. So look for their defensive scoring defense to be pretty good, and look for them to be pretty high in the metrics going into the Big 12 season. But all right, they are 5th in the Big 12 preseason poll. Mike, we skipped over the team that's 3rd. They're actually 6th in Torvik, and that's Grant McCasland in Texas Tech. JT Toppin is back for the Red Raiders, and he has been named the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year. They bring back Christian Anderson as well, who's a real rising candidate to potentially be an NBA draft pick after this year. They have a couple other seniors coming back as well, but despite not being at the top of the pile, or projected to be at the top of the pile, the Red Raiders still have a lot of expectations.
Yeah, I really battled back and forth whether I wanted Arizona or Texas Tech to be my number 2. So that's how high I think of Texas Tech. Look, JT Toppin is the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year, and he's going to compete for a national Basketball Player of the Year. He's going to compete for the Wooden Award and the Naismith Award for sure. If you look at a lot of experience that they have coming back, Christian Anderson as well, and they've also got some really good transfers coming in. LeJean Watts coming in, having about 14 points a game for Washington State, and a few others. This is going to be a really good team. And I said this about TJ Osselberger. Look, Texas Tech under Grant McCasland is always they've overperformed.
Yep.
They've done a great job. They made a deep run last year as well. It looked like for a second they were going to knock off Florida and potentially get to the Final Four. Fortunately, that didn't work out for him, but I really like him. He's my favorite coach in the Big 12 right now, and so I think Texas Tech is on a really good trajectory, and he's a guy that seems to be getting more with less. Texas Tech's spending most of their NIL money with their football program, but he's doing a lot with what he's got right here in his ability to keep JT Toppin in Lubbock, but also getting some new talent. It's very impressive.
Yeah, we've been following him since his North Texas days, and you are pretty quick on the fact that he was going to do well here at Texas Tech, and it seems like that, there is a pretty high floor with whatever group he's able to put together. Maybe a national championship or a Final Four might rely on a really good star and a good supporting cast, but it seems like you could throw a bunch of average players together, and I would think that he could get them to a 7 or 8 seed in the tournament, even though they probably aren't good enough to. But he seems to be getting the most possible out of his guys, and the top 2 here might be the best 1-2 in the conference. Them or Richie Saunders and Debansa for me. They're 2 players who are going to be in the NBA. You've gotten some seniors and some transfers to fill out that supporting cast, and Mike, as much as shooting is a question mark for some of these other teams, I think Texas Tech's going to shoot it really well. Their top 5 players have all shot it really well on high attempts in college before. And Toppin, who's not a three-point shooter, is still 33%. So I think shooting is going to be a big thing for them. And when you have a good three-point shooting team, you get a little high variances, and then you could beat anybody for putting the ball through the bucket. So expectations high here for Texas Tech. Maybe not national championship good, but I still think they have a chance to do something really special. They do go on the road to Illinois. They have LSU and Arkansas on neutrals, and then they face Duke on a neutral as well. So 4 power conference opponents by my count, by Torvik's count. Wake Forest, sorry. So they have 5 as well.
Yeah. I think Wake Forest is Wake Forest is Baha Mar.
Okay, so they'll get another one there. So not Feast Week yet, so I'm not super locked in on Baha Mar, who the other 2 teams are there. But there's a chance they have 6 power conference opponents, Mike, and for bracketology and metric purposes, none of them are at home, which is, great for the numbers. We talk about quad 1 opportunities. You just have to be in the top 50 for it to count as a quad one game on a neutral, and then of course 75 on the road. So Illinois will be in the top 75 for sure.
Yeah.
And the only one that might drop out, LSU and Wake Forest, both outside the top 50 right now on neutrals. They would have to play a little better than they're expected, but still 3 definite quad one games. So a chance for Texas Tech to have a solid tournament resume before they even tip a Big 12 game.
Yeah, and you look at their Big 12 schedule, it can get tough. They got to play Houston twice. I believe they've got to. Actually, no, they only played Baylor once this year. That's surprising. But, one thing that people don't often talk about is how tough of a place to play that it is in Lubbock. That is, I think, the toughest place to play in the Big 12 aside from Allen Fieldhouse. Allen Fieldhouse, we all know that that's a 5 to 7 point advantage just based off of the officiating. But United Supermarkets Arena is not much different at all. Tech brings an incredible crowd, and that's such a tough place to play. So I would expect them, honestly, they probably don't lose more than one game at home this year.
And they have plenty of opportunities for big wins too. Houston at home, BYU at home, Kansas at home. They do not host Iowa State, but pretty much all the other good teams, all the other good teams they host at home. So they're going to pick up some resume-defining victories in the Big 12 most likely, and there's a chance they already have 1 or 2 from the non-conference. But Mike, we've gone through 5 teams. One of them is notably not Kansas. The Jayhawks and Bill Self come in at 6th in the preseason poll here. They do have the 1A or B recruit in the country in Darren Peterson with the Bansa. Different places have him ranked in different spots. But it's Bill Self and Kansas at 17th and Torvik. They have replaced Harris and Dickinson and some of their older veterans with more veterans in the transfer portal, notably Melvin Council. I believe he's from St. Bonaventure last year, but originally from Wagner. Yep. And then you have Trey White, who's from Illinois, and then somewhere else before that. They have Flory Badunga back for a year, too, also, without Hunter Dickinson taking up the minutes at the 5. So it seems, we talked about Kansas in our other video, it seems that they might be going under the radar a little bit coming into this year.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I don't see much with Kansas is I don't see a whole lot of depth.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that really concerns me. Look, Darren Peterson is an incredible player, and he'll probably be a lottery pick next year. But I think it's becoming increasingly more and more tough to rely on one lottery player to carry your team. Look, we talked about it in our previous pod, how Cooper Flagg was maybe an exception to the rule, but he had such an incredible supporting cast around him. He had other lottery picks on his team.
Yeah.
Right, with Ron Knippel. So it's just different. I think part of me, and I said this earlier, I do think this is Bill Self's final year as the head coach. It just, to me, seems like his health issues have gotten directly in the way with the success of this team, because whenever his health episode started, that's directly correlated to when this team stopped performing at the high level that we expect Bill Self teams to. This is also probably the least expectations we've seen at a Kansas Bill Self team. Yep. So it's going to be interesting. They've got some really tough games in the out-of-conference. They play, I think, probably over half of their scheduled games are against Power 5 opponents. You're looking at Missouri, UConn, Syracuse, Notre Dame, Duke, UNC, and I think they're playing in the Vegas tournament over Thanksgiving, so there'll be another one there. So they play a really tough schedule in the out-of-conference. I don't know. I don't think this is going to be a great team. I think we're looking at a 7 or 8 seed in the tournament, and I think this is going to be his last year as head coach at Kansas.
It's just the last few years have really they've really not finished strong, and whether that was him, putting himself first, which is obviously what he should do, but they have really finished weakly the last few years, and it just seems like really he was ready to be done with the last 2 years. Like he even said it,
Yeah,
the
he said it on
McCullough
the record.
the McCullough year. I just am looking forward to next year. And then last year they were no fun to watch with Dickinson and Harris, and
No.
they won some games, but they were like clearly a step below the top of this conference. And I think unless Peterson is as good as flat, like one of the best Zion flag level freshmen, I think they're not going to be at the top again. I think they're a solid team. They'll make the tournament. There's just too many games on this schedule for them not to. But yeah, like they're gonna have to figure it out quickly too. Like you said, Mike, their non-conference schedule is as loaded as it gets, and at Players Era, they have Notre Dame and Syracuse. And if you remember the way that works, it's Monday, Tuesday, and then it was Friday for Game 3 last year. I believe it's just Wednesday this year, but your third game is based on your wins. If you think they'd win both of those, they would get another team that's 2-0, so that is likely to be another really good team. But you have, at NC State, the 38th team in Torvik, like that's no easy
Yeah,
win. You just
not at
have a
all.
lot of landmines here, and even if you look at their bye games, they're not the 300 pluses that we see from Otzelberger and Ohio State. Green Bay is at 257. We've got 210, 185, 121, and 153. Those teams are beating the 350s by 20 plus on a neutral. So this, Kansas always does this with their non-conference. They always pick these mid majors who are really good, and it ends up boosting their numbers tremendously when they beat them by 19 or 20. You don't think much of it at the time, but you know when Princeton goes 28-5 or Towson goes 26-7, that's how their bracketology numbers have looked so good, and it looks like that might happen again. But you see a lot of red on here. That means they are not favored to win the game.
Yeah.
20-10, 11-7 is the prediction. I think shooting might be a
It's
problem for
generous.
them again, but yeah, that's certainly on the generous side. I would say if they get to 20-10, that'll be a job well done.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Mike. Well, let's end off our team by team discussions here with your Baylor Bears, number 7 in the preseason poll, and my unofficial line of tournament teams. If I had to guess right now, I think everybody below Baylor is out, and everybody above them is in. Um, your Baylor Bears did play an exhibition in Indianapolis against Indiana. It was 76-74 Hoosiers. Baylor 35th in. Torvik got Drew back for another year. And Mike, that game between Indiana and Baylor featured 0 returning minutes from both teams. Obviously, a big turnover for both of our teams, but this is the Big 12 preview, so really an open book for Baylor this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I could talk about with this team. Not a single player, walk on, scrub, nothing. No one's returning onto this Baylor roster. Scott Drew had to completely gut his team and start from scratch, especially after Robert Wright left to go to Brigham Young this year. They're going to be carried by freshman Tunde Asefu, who he's looked good in the preseason, but he's not going to be a guy that you're going to be able to carry your way to a Elite Eight or Final Four. So that's not the expectation in Waco this year. I don't care what irrational Baylor fan says. But with that being said, uh, this team's going to have to finish games, and we've seen it a lot in the preseason. We saw it against Indiana. They Baylor had a pretty comfortable lead in the first half. They gave it up and then some. They came back a little bit in that game, but it wasn't enough. We also saw them this past summer playing in, I think it's called the World Collegiate Games, where they had a 26-point lead over, I believe it was Germany, and they blew it. They lost to Germany in the gold medal match in that game. So that's the kind of things that's really concerning for me. With that being said, a lot of these new guys that they have, they've got some, a lot of experience. Obi Agbeam with formerly with Wyoming is going to be a good player. Michael Ratage is going to be a good player coming from Oregon State. I'm just it's got to be tough to have a team completely from scratch come and make a big impact in the start of the year. And Baylor has an easier than most seasons out of conference schedule. They've got Washington early, and then they play in Vegas. They've got Creighton, St. John's, and Memphis on the road. But that's a far cry from their most of their previous out of conference schedules. I just don't see this team doing better than 10-10 in conference this year. The least excited I've been about a Baylor team in probably 7 years. If I'm being honest, Sean, I don't see a whole lot of potential once if they get into the tournament.
It,
That's a
what
big if.
the big you know emphasis I had from watching them play 40 minutes was that they don't have a star.
Yeah,
I think they'll have multiple double digit scorers, but like you said, finishing those games, you need somebody to take the ball and score. And I don't know if that person has shown themselves yet. I think it might be okay to figure that out early on. Washington is a really, really sneaky team this year. Basically, the best players from USC last year, Wesley Yates and Desmond Claude, are now on Washington with Danny Sprinkle. So that could be an interesting one. I
yeah,
do like that that's at home. You've got Players Era as well, I believe. Creighton and St.
yeah.
John's are two really, really tough teams there. And then Memphis on the road, that team always is, you know, really, really hard in the non-conference. So, yeah, I think it will be. They showed me enough in that game. I think they're pretty athletic. I think they have some pretty good rim protection with Bodo, but they don't. I don't know if they have. If you went down the list of the 15 or 16 best players in this league, if they have one of them, um, which
Yeah, I mean, maybe Yusefu.
yeah, I mean
I was surprised that Yusefu was left off the All Big 12 team, if I'm being honest. But that's it.
yeah. So somebody's going to have to step up and give more than they're expected to. I think this will be a pretty this will be a bubble team. It's probably going to come
Yeah,
down to if you can win enough big games. Got plenty of them to pick from, but shooting is going to be a positive for this team. I think the top three, Agbem, Rataj, and White, have all shot it well at a Division One level before, and then you add the freshmen. Skillings at 30% essentially on not a lot of attempts, not terrible either. So maybe you can shoot yourself to enough wins, but yeah, I don't know if I mean, with Players Era, you don't really schedule those. You say yes to the invitation and you see what happens, and years in advance. Creighton and St. John's will be tough matchups, but maybe you can get a win in Game 3 there against, I think, Syracuse or Notre Dame, maybe, and then Memphis on the road. Memphis doesn't have as high of expectations as possible, so it is possible that you get a big win or two that you can take into Big 12 play, and you also have this Louisville non-conference game here in
yeah, in
February. Like,
February.
we saw Duke
Yeah.
do this with Illinois last year, and it's Michigan this time around. But yeah, that's one that could. We talk about non-conference wins aging poorly. There's not going to be much aging with that one because it's going to be so late in the year. But
Yeah. Yeah,
if
that game's in middle of February,
yeah,
neutral game at Fort Worth.
so I know it is a non-conference game, but I don't really think it's fair to lump that in with the non-conference.
No.
Um, if you pick up a big non-conference win, that to me is before Christmas. But still, like, what a great shot in the arm that could be if you beat BYU and then beat Louisville back to back.
Huge.
That could take you from out of the picture if you're 14-9 at the time to 16-9 and you have two big wins all of a sudden. So yeah, those two games are going to be big for me. If you can get one of those, I think you'll be in the tournament. But after that, Mike, it gets a little bit dicey here in the Big 12. Of the rest of these teams, Cincinnati down, do you think there is a tournament team in there?
Um, I think K-State is going to have a good year this year. They've got some strong players that are coming into this program. PJ Haggerty, namely coming in from Memphis, is going to be a huge shot in the arm to Coach Tang's squad. So I like them to get in to sneak into the bubble. It'll be K-State's first tournament in a while. Look, Cincinnati, that's a team that needs to make the tournament. in order to, for their coach to be sticking around. He's been right there on the hot seat for a while, but this is one that they need to have in order to win. But once you get past that, I don't love TCU this year. I don't think they have got enough talent returning in order to win. And then you look at the rest of this conference, it goes downhill pretty quick,
Yep. And I
very
think,
quick. I mean,
yeah, I think that might be beneficial to the middle of this league.
yeah,
If, like we talked about it when the Big 12 was a 10-team league with 9 legit tournament teams with like a month to go, you sort of
yeah,
needed somebody to fall out there. And it never really happened. I think they only got 7 in, if I'm not mistaken. This was probably the first or second
yep,
year of this podcast, but this is
yeah,
completely
2022.
different now. I think West Virginia has a chance to surprise some people with Ross Hodge in year one. There, he brings over Jasper Floyd from North Texas and a few others. But Mike, a little bit of a surprising thing here is Kansas State's actually 14th in Torvik in the Big 12, 80th overall, which is very surprising if you've looked at their
Yeah.
roster. Their offense is 90th. That is a little bit surprising to look at
Oh my
for
goodness.
the
Yeah.
first time here. They bring in Marcus Johnson from Bowling Green. If you remember, I think he had like 36 against Michigan State in a non-conference game that was way too close last year. He's like 6'7", but he's a 5, and he's really fun to watch. And he hits step back threes and stuff, but he's also a 5. And then you have Haggerty, as you said. You have a Bashir from Monmouth, who I believe was the best 3-point shooter in the country last year in terms of
Was he the
makes.
MAAC Player of the Year last year?
They're in the Coastal now. They're not in the
Uh,
MAC. But yeah, I believe he was a couple of really big time teams were after him, and he ended up going to Kansas State because he was promised a bigger role. But 127 threes, that is a lot of makes in a season for him. So you know,
yeah, you look at the returning points per game from this team,
yeah,
and you think those metrics have got to be off because you look at these averages, and given most of them were against lesser talent, but I mean, I'm looking at these top four guys. You're looking at between these four guys, what, 72 points per game average
yep.
on four players.
And I think yeah, there's a lot of points for 90th here, and they are all in the formula because they're all listed here. So it's not as if they've been forgotten here by Bart. The rosters have been updated over the summer a few times, and there were some people missing, and I think they are pretty solid right now. But yeah, that something doesn't add up here, Mike. These are all
Yeah.
number one options, albeit to a lesser level. But we've seen scorers sit in the corner at the mid-major elite scorers sit in the corner at the Power 5 level and bang a bunch of threes too. So even if the roles aren't the same, yeah, I think this team could be a little bit better than Bart thinks. I think ninth is. I might have them a spot or two above, but yeah, interesting for Kansas State here. The Tang Gang sort of desperately needs to get back to the tournament for the
Yeah.
non-conference. They have Mississippi State at a neutral. They do head to Bloomington to play Indiana. They host Seton Hall, and they go to Creighton, and then they have a few others. Cal at home shouldn't be much of a problem, but
No.
yeah, there is not. Creighton on the road would be a pretty elite victory, but I think it does help that none of their big three games are at home, but there is a little bit of a disconnect with this non-conference schedule and the rest of the ones we already went over.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of Kansas State's play. It's been their MO for years, even before Jerome Tang was to
Yeah,
have a pretty easy out of conference. This is honestly a tough out of
yeah,
conference for K-State standards, if we're being honest. Going to Indiana on the road is not usually on their MO. But with that being said, They've got some games. They've got to play Creighton as well. We're starting to find Creighton is playing a whole lot of Big 12 teams
They
this year.
are.
My goodness. I
Let's pull
mean,
up their schedule for a second.
yeah, I'm curious now. I feel like they're on everybody's schedule right now.
Yeah.
One, two,
Yeah, they
three.
also go to Gonzaga, and then they play Baylor, Iowa State, Nebraska, Kansas State, Xavier, and then Marquette. Those are Big East games. But yeah, yeah,
Yeah, wow.
three games against Big 12 opponents here. Two of
Yeah.
them are, of course, at Players Era.
And then I think one is the Big East Big 12 battle, but
Yes.
still
Yeah.
interesting stuff for
I
the
mean,
Creighton Jays.
it would, if there is a Big East team to do that, it does make sense from a geography point of view.
It does.
But yeah, so let's go back to the rest of the Big 12. Um, we are going to wrap it up here. But Mike, if there's, I don't really think any of the other teams are going to be anywhere close. I think we could see like a real class disparity in this Big 12, like where there's not many teams around 500. Maybe like a 2-game buffer in between, 10th and ninth or something like that. But before we wrap this up, why don't let's both give a pretty bold prediction for this year in the Big 12.
My bold prediction is that Arizona, and I guess we talked about this a little bit earlier, Arizona is going to get a two-seed or better in March Madness. It's a team that I just love the makeup of this program. They've got a lot of returners, a lot of good firepower. I don't see them finishing below second in the Big 12 and getting a two-seed or maybe even a one-seed come March.
My bold prediction also has to do with Arizona, Mike, and I think that it might be too bold to pick which one, but I'm going to say an Arizona Wildcat wins Big 12 Player of the Year.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
there's a bunch of people who could win it between Houston, BYU, Texas Tech. I think their teams might be sort of full units where they might have a bunch of good players and one might not separate. I think Arizona has a good, three or four really good players. So I'm going to say an Arizona Wildcat wins Big 12 Player of the Year.
Like that. Wow. Very nice.
All right, as we wrap this one up, please be sure to check out our Big 12 Power Rankings post. If it's not out already, it'll be out soon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.